Coming to you from sunny California and the Great White North. Get ready. We are breaking down the obstacles on the Armchair Ninja Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Armchair Ninja Podcast. It is Friday, May 12th, 2017. My name is Rich, and joining me once again this week is Bijan. How you making out?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing awesome because the curse is lifted.
Did you pick Daniel Gill's team?
That's right. I did. I don't know if you remember, but I totally picked them as my dark horse win.
Well, I'm glad, man. Curse is lifted. Let's see if they make it to the end, though.
Yeah, it was a good episode. I was impressed. I was a little iffy. I was like, I like some of the people running, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be an entertaining episode, but it was good. I liked it.
Yeah, I feel you, man. It's one of those episodes where you just don't know what you're going to get. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of new faces in this particular episode. Like, as you said, a lot of the people came to play. They really, gave it their all, and it was pretty interesting to see. A lot of the young guns really made a name for themselves in this episode.
Yeah, we have to mention right off the bat, Barkley Stockett is a beast.
Ooh. Dude, she was amazing. Like, everybody that's been following National Ninja League and the regional circuits know her name keeps popping up as she's winning competitions and beast moding it. But man, she killed this course, dude.
She was awesome. Even though she lost her first run. Of course, we'll get through everything here, but she was strong every run. There was no question that she was in top form the whole time.
Yeah, and that leads to the other thing, and that's Michelle Warnke. I mean, she might as well, at this point, be the Lab Rats team captain. I think she's earned that status at this point. She is undefeated in this whole show, just like Matt Wilder from last episode, man. And once again, I'm sleeping on these stats for these competitors, but that is a huge feat for her.
Yeah, so we're going to be covering, obviously, the... I hate the numbering convention of this thing. Whatever. It's the fourth episode of this season for Team Ninja Warrior. We're also going to talk about the scoring a little bit. We had a suggestion come in. I kind of like to discuss the scoring again. I know we kind of harp on it a bit, but it's definitely worth going over one more time. And we're also going to do the draw. I bet you guys thought we forgot. We did the 100th episode. I wanted to make sure we gave it at least a month because a lot of people lag behind on their podcasting and stuff. So I want to make sure that everybody that listened had a chance to like the post to get in for the draw for Atomic Climbing Holds, $100 gift card. So we're going to be doing the draw for that live on the podcast. So let's get it. So we had 4 teams competing. We had Team Grit. That's Kevin Bull's team. Phoenix Force. That's the new team from Najee Richardson. The Lab Rats, headed up by Chris Wilczewski, and Iron Grip with Daniel Gill this season, replacing Sam Sand, who was captain last year. And the first matchup is Team Grit versus Phoenix Force. So Team Grit is Kevin Bull, Lance Picas, and Maggie Thorne. The same team that we saw running the, I want to say, Ultimate Spartan Master.
I was about to say the Spartan Ninjas. That is a much better team name, first of all, but I like Iron Grit. But all, competitors from the Spartan Ultimate Challenge blah, blah, blah show. And I'm happy to see Maggie Thorne because she is really competitive and she is a really good Spartan racer. And, she definitely showed off her skills today. And I'm glad Lance Picas and Kevin Bull are also there. They're a lot more, when you look at them, they're much more muscular type competitors, right? So you don't really perceive them as being fast, but both of them are very fast, especially Picas, man. For a guy that size, he can move.
Yeah, he definitely can move. And I always think of Kevin as fast, whether he's built, there's no question. But yeah, I've always thought him as one of the fastest and kind of perfect for this kind of a sport.
Mm-hmm.
And they went up against Najee Richards' team, which was the total newbie team, which was Najee.
The Young Guns.
Yeah, Cassie Craig and Dan Galazin. I knew I was going to mess his name out. Dan Galazinski? Something like that.
Better than how I could say it. Yeah, Cassie Craig, she's definitely a name that we know, and she's really good. Dan, I think, would have been the wild card. I don't know if we've seen him before, but they said he's a gym owner. I'm not sure what type of gym he owns, but A competitor like that, it's like it's one thing to be athletic, but it's another to be very comfortable with obstacles. So this team could either like really be good or just be very novice to a lot of these things, and that was the question mark going in for this team.
What was weird about this is they called them the newbies, but I just double checked my notes because I know Cassie Craig. I remember researching her last year for Team Ninja Warrior. She was on Ellett Hall's team last year, so she's definitely not new to Team Ninja Warrior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's young in the sport, but she definitely is comfortable. Like, you can tell she knows her obstacles, and she definitely has that experience. So, yeah, I'm glad to see her back, and she definitely showed off her skills today. I feel like if there was a team that was understated throughout the entire competition, it might have been this team. Sure, Najee Richardson had a lot of the spotlight, but his teammates, we didn't really find out a whole lot about them.
Yeah, it was a little odd. They left out a lot. But, I mean, it's hard to complain because it's one of the things we like about this show is that they don't go too much into the backstory, right? And I don't feel like they harped on anyone too much, so...
Yeah, I don't need everybody's sob story. But, I'm just saying.
Yeah, so there's a lot of unfamiliar faces, I guess, which kind of threw us off a bit. We're used to already knowing who everybody is, so... Right off the bat, we had Dan versus Lance. Now, they said Lance lost all of his races last year, which I had forgotten. I hadn't noticed, I guess. Lance got ahead early, and Dan ended up falling on the pole grass whereas he was trying to catch up. So, I mean, right off the bat, Lance got some redemption, so that was a good start for them.
You can definitely tell that Lance was really taking this seriously. He was, so focused. It was crazy. And once again, Dan... I feel like he'd do better next season or so. I keep harping on it, but a show like Team Ninja Warrior, you really have to have that experience. And if you're coming in freshly new to the sport, you're going to have a huge disadvantage.
Yeah. And I kind of felt like we saw that in a few of these runs today. Like even this next one, we had Maggie versus Cassie. So Maggie being new to Team Ninja Warrior specifically... she ended up getting hung up on the Ring of Fire and falling where Cassie completed it for the point. So we kind of saw some experience coming into play there probably.
Yeah, but once that might have been more of a case of nerves because it wasn't a situation where Maggie Thorne didn't know how to tackle the obstacle. It's more like she lashayed too early and she hit the end of the... I don't know, like the border of the water.
Right.
So it wasn't as much of an experience thing. It's just more of nerves, it looks like.
Yeah, and actually the counterpoint comes next because my money, I would actually made a note here, like Najee versus Kevin, as much as I love Najee and have him on my A&W fantasy team, I'm like, Kevin's got this.
Really?
Yeah, I thought he had it for sure.
I thought Najee was going to beat Kevin Bull. And I felt weird saying that, but... Najee, everything I've seen, he's very, very fast, and he has a huge gymnastics background. So if he's able to use his laches and swings, it's going to make for a big difference. But I will say to your credit, when it comes to those pole graspers, that was going to be the big question mark for me, to see how Najee would tackle it, because somebody like Kevin Bull, I have to imagine, can beast mode right through that thing.
Yeah, we saw Kevin really make up some time on that obstacle later in the episode. I like Najee's reaction when they're doing the interview afterwards. He's like, she asked how he was feeling, and he's like, yeah. I just beat Kevin Bull. Like, I can't even believe I just did that.
Yeah. It's really cool to hear, a lot more ninjas are revered now, especially by the younger ninjas. And that's really cool to see. I mean, the respect from all these athletes is really huge.
Yeah, it wasn't said in a trash talk. It was in a reverence way, like, oh my God, I just got to race, one of my
He almost looks like he didn't even know what happened. His face was like, what just happened?
So then we got a rematch. This was kind of cool. We get to see the Lab Rats versus Iron Grip. And as soon as that came up, I was like, wait a minute, didn't they race each other last year too? Why would they line them up again that way, I wonder?
I don't mind.
No, it was kind of cool to see. We end up with Chris, who was the team captain this year, decided to not run in the anchor spot, so he ran against Nate Burkhalter. Oh, I guess we should run through the teams here. Sorry. We've got the Lab Rats being Michelle Warnke, Chris Wilczewski, and Brian Wilczewski. And then
beast of a team right there.
Yeah, that is like an all-star team. Versus Iron Grip, which is Daniel Gill, Nate Burkhalter, and Barkley Stockett. A couple unfamiliar names for those that are only following American Ninja Warrior, but if you're following Ninja kind of in the off season, definitely definitely high up on Nate and Barkley.
Yeah, I feel like we have to talk about this first run. Why don't you say what happened, and we'll discuss this.
Yeah, so Chris, they're running. They're pretty neck and neck. Chris is ahead though, and Chris runs through the floating tiles first, and Nate comes behind him and gets tripped up. And really, I don't know why they didn't mention the fact that the tiles are like bouncing all over the place as Nate's trying to run across them because he's right behind Chris. It seems like it'd almost be worth waiting a second for them to kind of calm down rather than falling right behind the other person.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but it's hard in the moment. You're racing against somebody, they're right in front of you. Everything in, your athletic drive or competitive drive is saying just go for it. So I forgive a lot of the competitors making that mistake somewhat. It's not even really a mistake. It's just, a choice.
Yeah,
but
I hadn't really noticed, I guess, the effect of having someone running ahead of them. I knew that they could, hit each other on them, and I knew they could trip each other up a bit. But I hadn't really noticed how much bounce is left behind the person as they're launching off of them. So it really would be hard to find your footing as you went behind them.
Yeah, I noticed it day one, and if you guys look back, it accounts for almost all of the big falls that happen. It's usually the competitor coming from behind, and there's the somewhat larger gap where they're not side by side, and the pads are bouncing incredibly up and down, and what happens is it basically breaks your fall where you're trying to put your weight down, but it's going in a different direction, and you basically just lose all traction, and your foot slips out from underneath it. So imagine the pad, you're pressing down to like bounce off of it, right? But the pad is going upwards. So when you kick down, rather than it going with you and springing you forward, it just your foot kicks out from underneath the pad, and you basically just fly forward. And that's what we've been seeing a lot. I think it's just one of those things where it makes for a really good obstacle because that technical side, you have to figure it out. So I don't mind it.
So what you really want to talk about is the injury, I assume?
Yeah, this is one thing that I've noticed from a lot of competitors, and I can't really say it's wrong or good or anything, but it's just something where a lot of these competitors will they know the other person failed, right? They fell into the water, and they continue on because they want to do the warped wall, which is fine. But the way we saw Chris Wilczewski tackle the pole graspers, he really tried to fly through it very quickly, and he was using almost all of his upper body. And that's what concerns me, because at this moment, you don't need to do that, and you're putting a lot of risk on your upper body. You can really pull a muscle, and unfortunately, we've seen a case, and I'm not just saying for him, I mean, we've seen many cases of this throughout the season, the last 2 seasons, actually. But this is a case where it came out to bite him in the butt, and, he got injured in the very first round, and that was unfortunate to see, and it was just a dumb thing that happened where it didn't need to happen. So my only thing is, if you're trying to get to the warped wall and you want to, complete the course, and that's fine and everything, just be a little bit more careful. You take your time. You don't need to fly through it. You don't need to be technically unsound, or improficient, especially from a competitor like Chris Wilczewski, who probably knows exactly how to tackle this obstacle. It was interesting seeing him be the one that just pulled his muscles doing it, using more of his upper body.
I can see just overlooking it a bit and just being caught up in the moment. So it happens, unfortunately. So the next race is probably my favorite race of the whole episode.
Yeah, it was pretty dope, right?
Oh my God. It was back and forth. They were Michelle versus Barkley. They're on the pole graspers at the same time. Barkley makes the first attempt at the warp wall. It looked like Michelle was going to get handed her first loss, but Barkley misses it and Michelle makes it. And it was a great run. Absolutely loved it.
It was neck and neck. They were flying. And the best part was, I mean, this is a ninja in Michelle Warnke, who's like one of the top female ninjas, right? And then we have Barkley Stockett, who's a rising star, especially in the regional scene. And probably next season, she's going to make a huge name for herself on ANW. It's nice to see, I guess, matchups like this where you have the young gun versus one of the top ninjas, and the young gun sticks with them in losing. With Barclay's socket losing, she actually did more for herself than her just beating some no-name competitor. And I can't say that enough. I mean, that was really impressive what she did.
So as close as Barclay got, she did end up losing that round, which meant that Daniel had to win it twice in order for them to progress. And I'm almost positive he was put in this position last year. So we get to see him go versus Brian. And I don't know. Brian, I knew he had it in him. But this run, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, Brian gets ahead. And I thought Daniel was done for right after that. I'm like, okay, well, apparently, Brian is really going to bring it this season. But then Daniel comes flying out of nowhere on that pole grasper and leaps ahead of him in one of the craziest come-from-behind victories I think we've seen.
Yeah, competitors like Daniel Gill, you have to watch out for him because you can never like call them down and out unless they fall into the water, because a competitor like Daniel Gill can pull off some crazy athletic feat and put himself right back into the standings, especially when it comes to, I can't even say upper body. I mean, lower body, he's a beast as well. Brian Wilczewski, he's young and he's very, very talented. He's a lot more technical, but I feel like Brian Wilczewski will do better on American Ninja Warrior. There are some competitors that are more technical and, like to take their time and figure it out, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Brian is fast for his own good, but he's more of just like, he likes to go at a certain pace and be perfect throughout the entire pace, if that makes sense, whereas there are a lot of competitors that will be a lot more frantic and just throw everything to the wall and try to be as fast as possible. And I felt like that's kind of what the story was with this run, where we saw one competitor be a little bit slower but completely consistent and get the edge out like for most of the course. But then with Daniel Gill just throwing everything out there and just going as fast as he can, he caught up and surpassed Brian at the last minute. So it's interesting. Both methods work. It just depends on who you're racing against. I have to imagine Chris, for Chris taking the first run, there must have been that strategy of Chris, if it does come to a tie, Chris can take the anchor run and face a more tired Daniel Gill. And I bet they're counting on that. I bet they're counting on Michelle Warnke getting the first point and everything. So I understand the logic in it. And I feel like if they had the chance, Chris would have done a better job kind of just going all out, especially during the relay. Spoilers, I guess. But I feel like they were hedging. It was a lot of strategy that just didn't pan out because of Chris's injury.
Yeah, because since Daniel ends up winning the first round, when it comes time to do the tiebreaker, Brian's got to run it again. So it is a rematch between Brian and Daniel. And this time, luckily, Daniel got hung up on the Ring of Fire for an extra amount of time and ends up failing on the dismount, which definitely didn't see that coming.
Well, this is what I was talking about with the two methods, right? Where you have somebody going at a really, at a regular pace, but taking their time and keeping their energy and everything. And then we have another competitor just going all out. With that risk, you saw both sides of it, where Daniel Gill was able to surpass Brian Wilczewski in the first round. But then in the second portion, where they're a little bit more tired, Daniel Gill tried the reckless approach again, and it didn't pan out for him. So, you see both methods, and they both work.
Yeah. So that meant that Iron Grip lost and had to face Phoenix Force in the next round. So the first matchup here was Nate versus Dan. Not much to say about this one. Dan ended up getting hung up on the Ring of Fire. Nate got ahead of him and ended up winning it.
Yeah, the writing was on the wall on this one. I was like,
Yeah. It was they seemed awfully tired. Seemed a little slower paced than I think we've seen with a lot of the races.
Yeah, I mean, that can account for many things, at least for Dan, I mean, he's probably new to all this. And when you're tackling an obstacle without proper technique and just using your athletic abilities, you're going to get more tired than most.
That makes sense. And then I think this isn't the first time we've seen it, but it is the first time this season We saw the men run the second round. We saw Najee versus Daniel.
I did not see that coming, and I was super psyched for this matchup. I mean, just think about it. Najee versus Daniel Gill.
Yeah.
Two of the top young ninjas in the entire sport, especially the two ninjas that really made a name for themselves last season. I mean, I was so psyched for this matchup, and it delivered.
Yeah, it was a good matchup. Najee ended up getting hung up, though, and Daniel just blew through in the end. It was just too fast and too good, and ended up winning the round.
Yeah, in many cases, the second portion, I feel like Daniel Gill definitely made up for his faux pas in the first, I guess, round or whatever. I mean, Daniel really showed off how his experience over the past 2 years has really grown, and he still keeps that young, youthful speed, but he's a lot more technical when he tries to be. The first round, we saw him being a little bit more reckless, and it didn't pan out for him really. But with these matchups against Najee, he was a lot more technical, and it worked out for him flawlessly.
So that meant Iron Grip was up 2-0, and I couldn't help but think that Cassie Craig had a little too much on her shoulders with Barkley Stockett having to beat her twice in a row. It seemed like an awfully tall order.
Yeah. With that said, I mean, I don't think they would have gone twice in a row. I feel like another reason they had the men go second is that if there would have been a tie, they would have had enough rest to go again. So I think that's what everybody was counting on.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, yeah, I guess we could just have them switch out both competitors for the tiebreaker, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Cassie Craig, as you said, Cassie Craig's really, really good, but Barkley Stockett's really made a name for herself, so she was going up against a giant in that one.
Yeah, the newfound giant.
5-foot giant.
The 5-foot firecracker.
Yeah.
I'm not crazy with that nickname, but...
Nope.
She deserves better, I think. Yeah, like Cassie ended up falling on the swing into the cargo net, unfortunately, so Barkley ends up winning it, and she did she wanted to complete it, and she did. She nailed it. She nailed the warp wall that time.
Yeah, I was so excited for her. Not just that, I mean, if she does this on ANW, she's gonna, they just alluded to it. I mean, she's 5 foot. The only other 5-footer female is Casey Catanzaro, and we saw how big of a deal that was. I mean, she can really make a name for herself. And when you look at she's really young, really athletic, and her arms are twice the size of mine, dude. This woman is built. I feel like she can really make a name for herself in many different aspects.
Yeah, and she's been training for a whole year.
Yeah, right?
Holy mackerel. How good is she going to be? And this was last summer, so I mean, she's had an extra year of training for this season. I can't wait to see how she does.
Oh, yeah, I think she's going to just be superstar status. I'm really looking forward to a lot of the women breaking through, and she's definitely on my radar as well.
So that meant the next matchup was Team Grit versus the Lab Rats. With Chris being out due to his shoulder injury from the earlier round, Arnold Hernandez stepped in to run for him.
Yes! Arnold Hernandez, this guy is amazing. He's really, as you imagine, he's got a gym in the LA scene. We always see him in the LA qualifiers. He always does well. I feel like this is a guy that's also understated. I feel like he's one of the people where, the casual audience at home, oh, I know that guy. I recognize his face, but I don't know his name maybe. But, of course I do, and probably you do, man. But I'm really glad that we got to see him on this show and, him show off what he can do because he is really, really talented.
It's funny that he and Chris Wilczewski stuck out to me this year. When they're veterans and they've been around for a few years, I keep thinking they're older than they actually are. He's only in his mid-20s. Chris is only in his 27. They're the prime. They're not even close to veterans of the sport in the way you normally would think.
Oh yeah, they're both younger than me.
Yeah. So we got to see right off the bat, Arnold had to jump in and go up against Lance Pekas. Lance ended up messing up the jump to the floating tiles and somehow managed to save it. He almost did he did a flip, basically.
Yeah.
Almost went off the court, almost went down, but did manage to save it. Arnold missed the wall on the first attempt. I thought he might lose it at that point, but he did make it on his second attempt and ended up winning the race, coming cold off the bench.
Mm-hmm. I was happy for him, and somebody's going to really hurt them. Well, now I think about it, somebody already did hurt themselves on that dang obstacle. Yeah, that obstacle, man. Like, I like it. It's got a great premise, but there's something about the bungees and just the whipping that they do, the competitors do when they fall. It makes for some really scary situations, and I don't know. I can definitely understand if we don't see it again.
Yeah, you think the Dancing Stones were a better choice?
Well, I love the Dancing Stones. I'm sure there are a lot of competitors that absolutely hate them with a passion. I mean, if I was a competitor, I would hate those things. But yeah, these bungees, I don't know. I feel like any of the producers kind of have to like hold their breath every time somebody falls on this thing, being like, "Oh, geez, there's a health problem right there, like health claim. Please don't sue us."
Yeah, they're a little scary at times. I think the Dancing Stones would be less injury prone, at least. If I don't know if they'd be any easier, but they would definitely seem to be.
They are not easier. I can tell you that right now. Dancing Stones, we saw way more falls with the Dancing Stones.
Yeah. Next run was Maggie versus Michelle, and I have to say, before we talk about Michelle's freaking amazing run, that Maggie probably had the best unappreciated run we've seen. Like, she did a really great job and would have beaten so many competitors we've seen, but it just got set aside because Michelle just freaking crushed the course.
Yeah, I mean, it's Michelle Warnke. She's beast mode and so good. I can definitely see that Maggie Thorne probably trained for this competition because, as you said, she did every obstacle very, very well, kept a great pace, and she got up the warped wall. So another woman up the warped wall. I mean, we saw 3 women up it today in this episode. So I'm really happy about that and really excited. I feel like almost probably all 4 of these women we're going to see again. This wasn't an episode where there's this one female competitor where it's like, oh, she tried, good for her, but
right.
you know, like she still needs some training. Like all 4 of these women definitely knew what they were doing, and they were very high level. It was a really tough field, especially with Michelle Warnke up there. And she definitely showed her dominance by beating off the 3 other women, but all 4 competitors were amazing.
Yep, absolutely. So that was the fastest time for a woman this season at 58 seconds. That's really, really good.
That's impressive, dude.
So it came down to Kevin Bull versus Brian Wolczewski in the final heat. Kevin got hung up in the swing to the cargo net again. I don't know what was going on with him in this episode, but it wasn't a good time for him.
No, it wasn't.
He almost caught up. He almost managed to redeem himself immediately because he just started flying through the course. Just about caught up anyway on the pole grasper, but Brian did end up winning in the end.
Yeah, for a second there, I'm like, oh my God, is Kevin Bull going to do it? Like, what? But yeah, it was way too much of a field to catch up on. But Kevin Bull, once again, in losing, he showed like how talented he is. And I have to really give it up for Brian Wolczewski because he definitely wasn't featured. Like, he was shown the most of their team, right? Right up there with Michelle Warnke, but we didn't really get a lot from him in terms of like interview or anything. And we just know they just allude to the fact that he was the younger brother of Chris Wolczewski, kind of like a reverse of last season where Brian was the team captain and Chris was just a member of the team, and we're both like, what? Like, why is that? It was kind of the reverse of this one where Chris was the team captain, really the leader of their team and showing the most, but Brian really was understated. And Brian definitely showed his own of showing like, hey, I'm still here and I'm very, very good. I'm very technical. I think Brian's going to do a lot better on ANW. I think that's more of the competition for his style.
I mean, Brian did really well. They gave him a little promo piece at the beginning. I thought it was pretty good. They talked about him moving to California, starting to do surfing and things. They gave him a little interview bit at the beginning.
I completely missed that, dude. If they did, that would have been ones where I guess I checked out because I don't remember any of that. But I'm sure it happened. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so they did give him a little bit at the beginning. I don't know where the time went. I guess they were kind of alluding to the shoulder injury a little more. I don't know. It did seem like they didn't have as much interview segments, but at the same time, I don't know. Like,
I'm not going to be complaining about like vignettes. We've got enough of it at this point. I feel like they're like, you guys know who these people are, but there are a lot of newbies also, or new audiences watching this show as
right.
well.
You always have to kind of assume that not everybody is diehard fans that remembers every little detail, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially when it's on a new network.
Yeah. All right. So that meant the relay showdown was going to be Iron Grip versus the Lab Rats. Pretty excited to see this matchup, and I was really interested in how they were going to line them up because they had such strong teams. It was like, well, what order is everybody going to run in? And there was a little bit of a mismatch here. We had Arnold versus Barkley to start it off, Michelle versus Nate pulling down the middle part of the course, and Brian versus Daniel to anchor the whole thing.
Perfect placement.
Did you think that was perfect?
Perfect, yes. So the reason is because when we saw Arnold run, he was really fast and flawless in the beginning portion, but he had a slowdown when it came to the pole grasper. And guess what? It's the complete opposite or reverse when we're talking about Michelle Warnke, where she always had trouble with the Ring of Fire, if you remember. She was always caught up on that. They both can avoid their weaknesses and I guess even each other out with that. And, Michelle Warnke is super fast and good up the warped wall, so there's not all those question marks. I mean, they can definitely support each other on both portions. And on the other team, it works out however they wanted it to. It's fine. So, yeah, I had no problems with the placements at all. How'd you feel?
I was okay with them. I kind of want to see Michelle versus Barkley again going through the pole grasp and everything. Have that kind of a rematch of what we saw earlier where Barkley was the first to the wall but Michelle pulled ahead. I kind of wanted to see that rematch.
Mm-hmm. But with Barkley Stockett, this is a part where she is 5 foot. Do you really want her on the pole grasper trying to fly through that thing?
I felt like she had no weaknesses. I really wouldn't have taken issue with her at any part of the course. Like I would have had no problem with her doing the back portion of it, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to, going whoever has the highest strengths, you don't want that question mark with Barkley Stockett being like, will you be able to fly through this? Or are you going to have to, really stretch out and take your time to grab the next pole? Yeah. As compared to, just getting through the Ring of Fire, we know you can do it quickly.
But, I mean, Nate fell on the floating tiles in his first run. So, I mean, technically, if you want to look at performance, Barkley did better at that part of the course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they can go either way.
Yeah.
I feel like it was perfect how it was because, I don't know, I wouldn't want to take that risk.
Yeah, it did work out in the end. I felt like it was kind of the right choice when we saw the race go. Arnold did pull slightly ahead at the tag. They both did well. And then Michelle was the first to tag on the second part. She didn't lose that lead, but Nate wasn't too far behind. Mm-hmm. And it just came down to the captains, Brian versus Daniel.
Poor Brian. I mean, the writing was on the wall with this one, right? Because
I don't know.
As good as I know, I've seen both these competitors, and it's one of those things where it's like, as long as they're both technical and both going at the pace that I know they can go, Daniel Gill is so strong when it comes to the upper body, and especially grip strength, where it's like Brian has a chance, but he's going to have a really tough time there. I mean, with that said, Brian does train just as much as Daniel Gill, but from what I've seen from both competitors, I mean, he had a really tough challenge ahead of him.
Yeah, because when they've showed even clips from last season, they kind of reminded you of how fast Daniel can go through those types of obstacles. When he on the globe graspers and he just started flying through them, it's like, Brian's in trouble. He's gonna have a little trouble here catching up to him, because I'm pretty sure Daniel's gonna hit that invisible ladder first.
Yeah, I mean, with that said, what's up with that invisible ladder, dude? Both competitors gassed out.
Yeah,
I think that's the first this season, right, that we saw that. It's
first we've seen it ever where they both didn't complete, isn't it?
I think we've seen it at one point, season 1. I could be wrong, though.
I don't remember that rule where it's whoever went higher. I don't remember having that come into play before.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's very Ultimate Beastmaster-esque. But
yeah.
I found it very interesting where both of them were tired. And it could be attributed to many things. Maybe the bungees were a lot looser on this one. Maybe they were so neck and neck that they tried to fly through it. They didn't give themselves enough time to, catch their breath. Could be many things.
Oh, we're geniuses. They didn't have the invisible ladder last season. No wonder it didn't happen.
Yeah, good point. Now I think about it. Now that you said that, there we go.
Yeah, so definitely.
Hey, everybody, we're super smart here. Yeah.
I'm surprised it hasn't happened more, to be honest, because think of how many people gassed out in the regular season, for them to be racing to that point and then trying to race against somebody, like, it would be a heck of a lot easier to get hung up and not being able to complete it. Plus, it's higher.
Yeah, that does not look fun in the slightest from everything I've seen with the invisible ladder from before. I guess a lot of the competitors just don't, like, at that point, you just give it your all, right? Because you have nothing else in the day, and a lot of competitors, I guess, can just, will themselves up there. I mean, we've definitely seen in the previous episodes, it is not easy to get up there. There are competitors that almost fell, that they were, like, just giving it everything. You just see the struggle in their faces. So I don't knock either Brian or Daniel for falling on this obstacle, because it's so incredibly hard. It's just one of those things.
Yeah. So Iron Grip ends up winning in the end. That was great. I'm really excited to see what they can do in the finals.
I really did not see them winning, so props to you, first of all, for choosing them. And yeah, I'm interested to see them. I can't say I can't say I like their odds against the other teams, though.
Really? Barkley, I think, can hold her own, and we know Daniel can, so the only real question mark is, can Nate keep up?
Yeah, I feel you. I don't know. Something about when I see the teams going into the finals, I see like a fully rounded team, and I feel like Barkley Stockett's going to do great, but I feel like Daniel Gill, if he goes wild like he did in the first round, that's going to, like, give me some pause, because Daniel Gill is going to be going against some really tough competition in the finals, and he's got to stay technical. And Nate, he's a question mark for me, so I just don't know enough to really get a whole sense of it. But I don't know. I'm not feeling that team, man. But that's your team, so
we'll see.
We'll see if the curse continues.
So let's talk about the scoring for a minute. We had an email from Adam Ulrich, who suggested a change for the scoring system. And we've gotten a few of these over the last year or two, and most of them I disagree with for one reason or another. There's always a reason that it doesn't make a lot of sense, because, yeah, it kind of sucks when a team loses the majority of their matchups but ends up winning the whole thing. I get that. But a lot of the changes that people propose makes it so that the runs are meaningless at points, right? So if winning early guarantees you moving on, then what's the point of running the later races, right? It just takes away from a lot of the episode. But I like Adam's approach to this. So let me describe it. His basic premise is that there needs to be more of a bonus for winning the earlier round, right? So if you win your first round, yes, you face the loser from the other matchup, but you should also get to choose who runs the 2-point round, whether it's the men or the women. And I like that change a lot. I think that actually satisfies a lot of criteria for making it more meaningful and not making any of the runs not count. And it also keeps it very fair. Yeah,
I agree with that. I mean, it's a small change, but makes a huge difference, and it makes it a little bit more fair. But when we talk about the formatting, it's always the argument in the minutia between fairness and good television. Because if we always go to the point where I always think, like, it makes sense, no-brainer of, hey, have a point system, right? And, maybe discredit, rather than a 1 point for the regular guys and 2 points for the captains, make it 2 points for the regular guys and 3 points for the team captains, where it kind of cuts it in half, the importance of the team captain race. But with that said, you can have situations, as you alluded to, where, and I'm just saying this format because I've heard it a lot online, of the point system. With that, there's going to be a lot of matchups where at a certain point you're watching this, them race for no reason because the other team's already knocked out, and it doesn't make for good television. It makes it more fair, but it's not good television, right? So with the approach you just gave to everybody, that does work, where it does drag it a little bit closer towards the middle ground of fairness and good television, where it completely doesn't handicap the television aspect of it, where there's still a chance for a team that can come from behind. But it makes it a little bit more fair and gives the first round of matchups more importance. So, yeah, that definitely works for me, man. I'm all down with that.
Yeah, it even kind of lines up with this episode. We did see the women run the 2-point race. So imagine that was by design, that And maybe it is. Someone's going to end up correcting us and saying, well, yeah, obviously whoever wins the first round gets to choose the lineup for the second round. I don't know if that's the case or not, but if it's not, I think that actually is a pretty big advantage because let's say, Daniel's team wins round one and he knows Barkley is, a good competitor to put up against Cassie Craig. We did see that took place. Now, Iron Grip had lost their first round, but let's say that they hadn't. And Daniel was like, you know what? I really like her odds better. And since we won, that's the matchup I want for the 2-point round. You can't argue that it's not fair. It keeps all of the races important. And it's a pretty big advantage to be able to choose which side. You can still have variation with the men, which men run, as we have now. But I think just that minor change would improve the scoring system significantly. All right, so let's move on. Let's do this draw. So, for those that aren't aware, in our episode 100, we had said that if you went to our Facebook page and liked the post, that you would get into a draw for a $100 gift card from Atomic Climbing Holds. Thank you very much to Atomic Climbing Holds once again for providing that. So we're going to do the draw right now. I thought it'd be interesting if I just get Bijan to pick a number. We had 27 people like the post. So I randomized the list. I took all of them and I just sorted them all through in a weird way so that this list is completely randomized. Bijan, pick a number between 1 and 27 and let's see who wins the gift card.
Favorite number, my man? I'm choosing 7.
So Taylor Sanders has won the prize. So Taylor will be reaching out to you on Facebook. Congratulations.
Congrats, Taylor.
Thank you very much to Taylor and everyone else that liked the post and those that shared it. Really appreciate that. It was interesting to do an episode 100 video podcast. We're probably never going to do it again, but we'll see if I could be talked into doing it again at a later.
We're doing it again.
A later milestone. All right, so that is it for this week. Thank you all for listening in. If you'd like to reach out to me, you can reach me at rich@ninjapodcast.com. I am at Ninja Podcast on both Twitter and Instagram. And Bijan, how can they reach you?
Yeah, man. Hit me up at Bijan151. That is Bijan 151 at Twitter and Instagram, guys.
All right, thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a fantastic week.
Peace and love, y'all.